Hello and welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Back in 2015, Privateer Press released the Undercity and Iron Kingdoms adventure board game to middling reviews and faint praise. Despite spawning a 2017 expandalone sequel called Widower's Wood, what could have been a successful dungeon crawling brand never took off, and especially in the UK, it quietly slipped into obscurity. But I always wanted to give the Undercity a try. Despite what seemed like rather apparent flaws, it spoke to me. It's a cooperative dungeon plunge for 1 to 4 players, it has nice miniatures, a fascinating setting and plot, and it really looked like something I would enjoy. So a few years back, when I spotted a rare instance of the game going for a reasonable price on eBay, I snagged a copy. And then it sat on my shelf for over a year gathering dust. I don't know why, it happens sometimes. But this year I promised myself I was going to introduce the Undercity to my gaming group and play through the 7-part campaign. And over the course of 3 sessions, that is exactly what happened. So what do I think? Does the Undercity earn its reputation of not having much of a reputation? Is it actually a diamond in the rough? First, let's talk presentation. The cover art is superb, depicting one of the main bosses with his horde of minions descending on 2 of the heroes. There's a real sense of genuine threat. Milo Boggs is unconscious on the ground while Canis desperately fends off their attackers. It's a bold choice. It's not often you see the heroes in trouble on the box art, and it sells the idea that cooperation is key to success and that there are real stakes involved. Sadly, the game doesn't capitalise on this excellent first impression. Many of the cards, while clean with a solid graphic design, have little to no artwork at all or constantly reuse the same artwork. And then there is the board. Much has been said of the board, and with fair reason. Conceptually, I like it. You have a large area of flagstones divided into a grid of large squares, and then you use tiles to create a maze of corridors and small rooms, adding doors, cracks, unstable ground, and objectives. It's a clever middle ground between HeroQuest static floor plans and the tile-based adventures of a game like Advanced HeroQuest. But it is boring to look at. Elements often blend into the flagstone pattern, and by the time you have set up your 3rd or 4th scenario, you will be yearning for a change of scenery, somewhere with a bit more colour and personality. Of course, the miniatures really caught my eye. They are rather good, nicely detailed pre-assembled pieces with integrated bases. They are, however, very rubbery, and the bases do tend to warp, so they may require a hot water treatment to straighten them out. But you do get a great selection. There are 4 heroes, one of which has a light steamjack companion. Then you get 10 thugs with swords, 8 thugs with crossbows, 8 drudges, which are surgically enhanced berserker slaves, 2 gobber cutthroats, 2 heavy jacks, 2 ogren brutes, 2 rulic mercenaries, 2 trollkin scouts, and 3 bosses. That's 11 types of enemies, all of which have a regular and epic version. Unfortunately, for all of that variety, you will mainly end up fighting the thugs. You will be utterly sick of them by the end of the campaign. The heroes represent the members of the Black River Irregulars, mercenaries who have been hired by the Watch Commander to investigate a smuggling ring in the sewer systems beneath the city. They are a colourful bunch, a gun mage, a trollkin warrior, a cutthroat with a special interest in making chemical weapons, and a gobber mechanic with a steamjack. When it comes to the characters in Dungeon Crawlers, there are 2 ways to approach it. You can have generic hero classes, or you can have pre-generated characters who come with their own personalities and characteristics preloaded. That's the option the designers of the Undercity went for, and they are clearly enamoured with their creations because they dedicated a lot of effort to writing a, frankly too long, campaign prologue, plus detailed prologues and epilogues for each quest, which often involve banter between the team. Personally, I am a fan of games with a strong narrative and sense of place, and pre-generated characters can really help to make your avatar feel grounded in the setting without a lot of mental heavy lifting. But for me, the Undercity takes things too far. The verbal sparring between the heroes is insufferable and adds little to forwarding the plot, and reading 1 or 2 pages of story before each mission can cause players to get a little fidgety. Furthermore, these snippets of story often involve descriptions of events that might not even have happened during your playthrough. For example, in one epilogue the Cutthroat is described as cradling his broken arm, while the Trollkin has killed the boss with his axe. But in our playthrough, the Cutthroat hadn't picked up a single wound and had been responsible for the death of the boss himself. It's a small thing, picky almost, but as someone who really enjoys games that weave a compelling story, this struck me as an example of doing it the wrong way. A good gaming narrative should focus on the overarching structure, the main events, the big picture. It's up to the players to fill in the details, otherwise it starts to feel like their actions aren't informing the story. The players lose their sense of agency because the story is happening regardless of what they do. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let's spend a few moments looking at the core gameplay elements. Once you have set up the board for the mission, players should select their characters. You will always play with a full team of 4, so if you have less than 4 players, some of you will be controlling multiple characters, which is not easy. Not only does every character have unique stats and special abilities, they also have a unique deck of feats that they will be drawing from constantly, and as the campaign progresses, they will acquire items and a slew of additional skills. Not to mention, Pog the Gobber has a Steamjack, which means one player is effectively controlling 2 characters anyway. Decisions on any given turn are often non-trivial, and it can be a lot to manage. In fact, I definitely wouldn't recommend the Undercity for solo play. Each character takes any unique tokens they need, a restorative elixir token, and health tokens. Plus, they will draw a starting hand of 3 feats. The game then plays out in rounds. First, you will draw an event card. If there are no event cards to pull, too bad. You're out of time and you lose the game. Sometimes you will get lucky and there is an ominous silence, but sometimes you will spawn more enemies, grant enemies a bonus, or there might be an environmental effect that stays in play until such time as you draw another environmental effect to replace it. Occasionally, devil rats will turn up, forcing you to make a hazard roll. This involves rolling a d6 and taking a wound on the result of a 5 or 6. You would think that some of those fancy stats on your character sheet, like perception or intelligence, might benefit you in some way for these rolls. But no. This is because the Undercity desperately wants to be a role-playing experience, so it throws in elements of role-playing and then does almost nothing to integrate those concepts in a cohesive manner. Only very rarely do you use any of your character stats other than defense, armor, and initiative. Having resolved the event card and taken note of whether it was blue or red, which sets the colour priority for the enemy AI for this round, players will take their turns in initiative order, and each player turn is divided into 3 phases. First, there is a spawning phase. During the setup for the mission, enemies are arranged in numbered spawn pools, so to spawn an enemy, you roll a d6 to select the relevant pool. You then roll a second d6 to select the spawn point where the enemy enters the board. Most spawn pools will contain blue and red enemies, and you always take the colour there is more of. If there is an equal number of each in the pool, you take the one that matches the colour priority set by this turn's event card. Next is the hero activation phase, which introduces a few interesting twists you may not have seen before. First, the player must choose a stance, which is something I only recall seeing previously in the superb hybrid from Rackham. If the player chooses hold, they cannot move, but if there are no enemies in their space, then their ranged attack rolls are boosted. That means they will roll 3d6 when attacking instead of the standard 2. If the player chooses walk, they can stay in the same space or move to an adjacent space. It's important to note that if they leave a space containing enemies, they must make one hazard roll for each enemy to represent attacks of opportunity. Furthermore, each space can only contain a maximum of 7 miniatures, with each large base miniature counting as 2, so it is possible to get bogged down, making it difficult to break through enemy lines to reach objectives under time pressure. If the player chooses charge, then they can move 1 or 2 spaces. They cannot make any ranged attacks that turn, but the damage roll for their first melee attack that turn will be boosted. Having selected a stance, the hero can move, if eligible, and take an action, or take an action and then move. An action is normally attacking, but it's also possible to use your action to revive a fallen comrade with a restorative elixir, or to interact with side quests or objectives, which may involve a stat challenge. This is the point when those various stats serve some kind of purpose. For example, here one of our heroes has a chance to discover an amulet in a muddy pool. They must make a Perception 10 challenge, which means they roll 2d6 and add their perception score. If their score is equal to or greater than the target value of 10, then they succeed and take the amulet card. This, however, is incredibly uncommon. I think in our whole playthrough of the campaign, we only made half a dozen of these tests, and they rarely felt significant. I feel this element could have been excised to declutter the game, and nothing of value would have been lost. More often than not, you are going to spend your action attacking, because while I do consider the Undercity a dungeon crawler, it really is more of a skirmish game. There is no exploration. Instead, you are in a fixed arena facing constant swarms of enemies that throw themselves into the meat grinder in an attempt to slow you down long enough for the timer to run out. You may occasionally open a door, but mainly you are going to open people's skulls. And here, Undercity does something very interesting, because when you take an attack action, you get to use all of your eligible weapons. That means our Trollkin warrior can shield bash an enemy and then immediately follow up with a swift axe attack. Making attacks is, unfortunately, more cumbersome and unintuitive than it has any right to be. First, you roll to hit. You roll 2d6 and add the accuracy from the attack profile for that particular weapon. In the case of our Trollkin, that would be 6, regardless of whether he uses his axe or shield. If the total equals or exceeds the target's defense, as listed on their reference card, you land a hit. Then you roll for damage. You roll another 2d6 and add the power of the weapon you are using, so this would be 9 for the Trollkin's axe. You then compare this to the target's armor value. I know what you are thinking. If it equals or exceeds that value, then the hit does damage. Wrong. This time, equaling the target value isn't enough. Now you have to exceed the armor value. Exceed the armor value by 4 or less and you do 1 damage, exceed it by 5 or more and you do 2 damage. And I think this is all so clunky. Why do you have to match one value but exceed another? And if you have a chance of doing double damage by scoring 5 more than the target's armor value, print 2 values on the reference card, the target score for basic damage and the target score for double damage. It streamlines the process and reduces the amount of mental arithmetic. Yes, I know working out 5 more than a target value isn't complex maths, but when you are making those calculations on the fly over and over again, it is a bit draining, and it does incrementally add to the time it takes to resolve each attack. And even once you have the combat sequence locked down, the amount of dice rolling and the number of calculations is excessive. As a minimum, an attack requires 2 rolls of 2d6, hit and damage. And each of those rolls involves summing the dice, adding a modifier, and possibly adding or subtracting additional modifiers. And you may be making 2 or more attacks in a single action. You may have boosted attacks that involve rolling 3d6. You may have special attacks that involve rolling 3d6 and taking either the 2 highest or 2 lowest values. You may have skills that allow rerolls. It's all just a bit kludgy. It doesn't help that there aren't any line of sight rules for ranged attacks, and the game uses a really unusual way of measuring range that prevents you from measuring diagonally past the corner of a wall. As a result, you end up with weird situations where characters can shoot around corners, or they cannot target an adjacent enemy because they are technically too far away due to a nearby wall. But underneath all that kludge, there are some really cool ideas. Because while a hero turn often boils down to moving and attacking, the game offers you so many ways to play within that simple framework. Each character has access to a starting ability, and what is really interesting here, and something more games should lean into, is that those abilities present choices, real tactical decision points that ask you to carefully consider your situation and plan a strategy accordingly. Milo, for example, starts with 3 types of grenade, and can gain access to more by leveling up, and on his turn, you can pick one type to use. Do you want to use acid grenades? They have high damage and do additional damage against mechanical constructs, but you need to roll to hit and their accuracy isn't great. Do you want to throw an explosive? They have a low damage output, but they hit automatically and damage every character in the target zone. Or do you want to throw a smoke grenade? They hit automatically, but they do no damage. Instead, they grant cover to characters concealed within the smoke. Right from the very first turn, there are important choices to make, and you feel like well-trained warriors able to adapt to different situations. And that only gets better as you level up. The team gains experience each time they damage an opponent, plus bonus experience based on how successfully they completed their mission objectives. And the experience can be used to purchase upgrade skills. Heroes can purchase low-value upgrades to broaden their options quickly, or they can save up for more powerful abilities. This was one of my favourite parts of the game, customising my character and combining new skills in fun ways. As Milo Boggs, I particularly enjoyed unlocking concussion grenades that knock down all the characters in a given zone. Once characters are knocked down, any attacks against them hit automatically, so Milo became a monstrous villain once I also picked up Mad Bomber, which lets you make 2 bomb attacks per turn, Anatomical Precision, which makes your first knife attack do instant damage, and All in the Wrist, which lets you make a bonus knife attack. This combination allowed Milo to knock down enemies and then generate multiple free hits by pouring acid on them and stabbing them repeatedly. He could single-handedly clear out multiple enemies with ease, which was great fun, but also makes me sound like a truly awful person. And that isn't the end of it. Each hero also has their own deck of feats. At the beginning of the mission they get 3 feat cards, and at the end of their activation they get to draw 1 more. They also each have a special second wind ability that gives them a way to refill their hand of feat cards once per mission. As you can never have more than 3 feat cards in your hand, it pays to use at least 1 per turn, but you will often want to use more because they are great. Each feat card has 2 skills on it, simply discard the card at the right time to apply one of those skills. With a full hand of 3 cards, that's 6 one-use abilities that you can use as desired to get you out of a jam or pull off some amazing acts of heroism. Or in my case, acts of villainy. Plus, each hero also has a special feat ability that lets them discard any 1 feat card for a special bonus. The Trollkin, for example, can discard a feat card to recover 2 wounds. Between base skills, unlocked skills, special feats and feat cards, there are so many ways to play out your turn, so many decisions to make, and it really is a lot of fun. But it also makes each hero far more complicated to work with than a hero in, for example, Hero Quest, and it does make games with less than 4 players a real bear to slog through. Once a hero finishes their activation and has drawn a new feat card, they must complete a villain phase, and this is another area of the game that demonstrates some rather neat design elements. The player draws a villain action card which specifies which enemies will activate. If there is a choice of enemies that meet the criteria, then you activate the ones that match the colour priority for the round. These villains will always target the closest heroes, and if there is a choice, they use the targeting priority on the bottom of the action card. Each enemy type has a tactics bar on their reference card that defines what they will do, and these are pretty straightforward once you internalise the iconography. Crossbow thugs, for example, will stay where they are, aim and make a ranged attack. If they can't do that, but moving 1 space would bring a hero into range, they will move up to 1 space and then make a regular ranged attack. If they can't do that, they will walk 1 space if a hero is within 3 spaces, or they will charge up to 2 spaces if the closest hero is more than 3 spaces away. The bosses work in pretty much the same way, but they also have their own initiative value and will activate when they reach their turn in the initiative order. Additionally, they will activate if a villain action card instructs them to. Sometimes special rules will overwrite a villain's basic instinct to hit heroes in the head with sharp or blunt objects, perhaps encouraging them to flee the board or hunt an NPC. But usually they are going to try to inflict grievous bodily harm, and I rather like how heroes take damage. They each have a row of heart tokens, or cog tokens in the case of the Steamjack, and when they take damage, the hearts are flipped face down. When a hero has no face-up tokens left, they are knocked down and incapacitated. From then on, in each of their spawning phases, they must return 2 heart tokens to the game box. If they run out of hearts, they pass out and take no further part in the mission. Before this happens, a fellow hero can give them a restorative elixir. If they do this, the downed hero flips all their remaining heart tokens face up and they are back in action. But they only regain their lost hearts at the end of the mission. Furthermore, restorative elixirs only have a 33% chance of being restored between missions, so it's generally a good idea to avoid taking dirt naps where possible, else you may struggle to make it through the whole campaign. And that is basically it. You work through the initiative order with each hero following these same steps, and you keep playing through rounds until all the heroes are incapacitated, time runs out, or they meet their objective. But while the core gameplay is fairly straightforward, each mission offers some twist on the standard format. You may be trying to find the body of an ambushed contact, apprehending suspects, preventing an enemy courier from escaping with vital information, defeating a boss while dodging a swinging crane hook, rescuing civilians, or preventing an infernal device from creating a monstrous foe. Each scenario is a sort of puzzle, and while a lot of the time your fate lies in the roll of the dice, the game is very tactical with a solution for each encounter that will maximise your chances of success. So there really is a lot to like here, but it's balanced by a fair amount of bad. You get truly brilliant design elements wrapped in the most infuriating rules inconsistencies and bad presentation I've seen in some time. The format of the rules book is a mess. It's so easy to miss small details, either through the formatting, the order in which information is imparted, or through inconsistent use of terminology. I think the worst example of how it's necessary to tease out valuable information from the convoluted mess of the rules relates to Milo Boggs' smoke grenades. The rules on his card say when you use a smoke grenade, you place a smoke marker on the target space. But what is a smoke marker? If we look in the rules under component descriptions, we are told smoke markers track the effects of Milo's grenades. Not helpful. If we look in the key game terms at the back of the rules, oh, smoke isn't listed. But cloud is listed, and the first line under cloud reads, if a space has a smoke marker in it, it is a cloud space. Who wrote that? Who even added the word cloud? If you put a smoke marker on a space, it's a smoke space. Leave clouds out of it. Now, in fairness to the rules are there, but they aren't presented in a way that makes it easy to find them when you are in the middle of a game and you want to check on something. And this is a problem through the core rules and the special rules for each scenario. You will read something and know you read it. You will vaguely remember the rule, but when you go back to read the section, that rule will elude you. You will flick back and forth until you think you have gone mad and imagined it, because you are looking for a single line of text in a densely packed paragraph. So ultimately, the Undercity is a game that, despite being relatively simple, makes it as difficult as possible to learn and internalise the rules. Stick with it and you will have fun, but how many people will stick with it? I did really enjoy my time in the Undercity, and I would love to play through the sequel Widower's Wood, which takes the same rules but charts the adventures of a new set of heroes as they explore a monster-infested wilderness. But I'm not sure I will play through the Undercity campaign again, at least not for a very long time. I feel like I've seen everything the game has to offer. The game only includes 4 heroes. Okay, technically 5 heroes, and you will always play with the whole team regardless of the number of players. You can customise those heroes with skills, but it's not particularly difficult to unlock most of the options over the course of the campaign, and some of the skills are clearly better than others, so it does feel like heroes will ultimately plough the same furrows. There are only 7 missions in total, and each is a gimmick-based puzzle to be solved. Once you know the best way to tackle it, there is no incentive to try another way. And this even undermines the idea of picking a scenario to play as a one-shot. In an attempt to make varied encounters, the designers overlooked the simple pleasures of exploration. Including one quest that was more of a generic dungeon plunge would probably have served better for gamers looking for a one-shot encounter. Some missions do include side quests, which are randomly drawn from a pre-constructed deck and scattered in out-of-the-way places on the map. Some represent loot, some are NPCs, and some are short quests that link together to form another strand of plot that weaves through the main narrative and offers additional rewards. These side quests could have been a way to encourage repeat plays, but they don't offer rewards that are valuable enough to risk deviating from a rigid plan, and the chance of finding a chaining side quest that creates a new narrative to explore is fairly remote. We played a whole campaign without ever finding the first part of a chain narrative. And even if you flipped every side quest card in the whole campaign, luck could dictate that you still wouldn't find one of those narratives. Without a large roster of heroes to mix and match, without new quests to challenge the players, without a wider variety of enemies and bosses, and without opportunities to explore locations beyond the bland grey flagstone corridors of the Undercity, the campaign system is simply too shallow to reward repeat plays. And that is a shame, because the Undercity is worth playing. The setting and the idea of the Black River Irregulars is compelling, the combat is engaging, the puzzle is challenging, and once you get to grips with the rules you can enjoy a relatively straightforward dungeon brawler with enough crunch to keep things interesting from turn to turn. It is a fabulous and flawed experience, as frustrating as it is fun. I'm not surprised it isn't regarded more highly or remembered more fondly, and the lack of expansions and sequels does make sense. The game is good, but it falls short of great. The Warmachine intellectual property, and by extension all the trappings of the Iron Kingdoms, now belongs to Steamforged Games. As such, they have the rights to remake the Undercity. I would like to think that one day they may seize that opportunity, dust off this clunky old system, polish it up, and make it into the game it could and should have been. Until then, I think if you want a game that does a lot of what the Undercity does but better, consider the D&D Adventure board game series. And that is it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.